My dear brothers and respected sisters, I greet you all with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. All praise is due to Allah. We bear witness and we testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we bear witness and we testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his messenger and his slave. All salawats and salams be upon our Prophet, upon his noble family, his righteous companions, and all those who follow his path till the last day. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, you remember last week we talked about a very current issue that we are facing as the Muslim community. And that was some of the causes of divorce in our community here, even in Melbourne. Today we'll talk yet another issue that we are facing as parents and we are facing as a Muslim community that we live in a Western country. And that is that we see a lot of our children, being born and growing up in Australia, why they are not getting married. We see a lot of young boys. I call them young because some of them are 30, some of them are 35, 40, and they're not married. And unfortunately, we see a lot of our daughters, a lot of our sisters, how difficult it was for their parents to raise them properly with Islam and culture and everything. And when it comes the time to get married, they hesitate and they don't want to get married. And as a parent, you're heartbroken because, as a parent myself, one of the du'as and one of the prayers that I make so my kids to grow up and for me to witness them getting married. And that is every parent's dream. But once they grow up, once they start to go to uni, once they do certain things, a lot of them shut that door and they say, I'm not interested. Some say, I'm not ready. And you know that in Islam, marriage is such a beautiful thing. Or Prophet ﷺ said, there is nothing like marriage for two who love one another. And that is a blessed marriage. It is important, my dear brothers and sisters, you dear fathers and you dear mothers, it is very, very important for every single one of us to sit down with our children and to have this sincere conversation. And remember, every single person is different from the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created every single one of us unique and different. Some want to get married when they're young. Some, they want to delay their marriage for certain reasons. And being an imam for so many years and dealing with so many people, and I picked and I chose some of the reasons why our young brothers and sisters are not getting married. And this is very, very important. And it's important for us parents, before I start to mention those things, that some parents say to us that, my son, even though he's 28, even though he's 30, he prays 5 daily prayers and, I don't think he will fall into haram or any of those things. That is something, don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself or your daughter or your son, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, and He said, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that made beautiful for mankind is the love of desire for women. This is how Allah created us. So don't think for a second if any of your sons or daughters or anyone says, I'm 20 something, I'm 30 and my mind never goes there, and even though I pray and I do those things, that is not true. That's why it's very important for us parents to have that sincere conversation, especially when our kids turn 18 and before they take that path. Because when you're that age, whatever decision you make, it will affect you for the rest of your life. If one of our daughters or one of our sons want to get married and he is 20, don't shut those doors and to say, why do you want to get married? You see, your friends, no one is getting married when they're 18 or 20. Don't do that. Because if you shut that door, they're going to do certain things out there. And remember, a few years ago, when you guys came here, let's say 10 years, 20 years ago, there were only few Muslim kids that you can count them in your hands that used to do, commit crimes and do haram and those things. Nowadays, we are talking about even the children of those families that are religious. They come to mosque. Even they're facing difficulties with their kids, especially when it comes to marriage. And you know that we live in a society where temptation is everywhere. As soon as you open your door, you get out of your house, there are temptations everywhere. And it is very, very important, my dear brothers and sisters, that these, premarital relationships, and this is the topic I mentioned last week. You remember when one of the imams in the States, he wrote an article in New York Times, I think, and he was telling that so many young Muslim, boys and girls were going to him so he can marry them in secret, without their parents knowing, without any witnesses, because they think that it's very hard for us to prevent this haram. And what we can do is have this secret, marriages, but we don't want our parents to know. Why? Because as parents, we send our kids to study and we expect results because we pay for tuition fees and all those things. But at the same time, even if they go that path, trying to get married without witnesses and without, announcing the marriage, that is also not allowed in Islam. One of the conditions of nikah, marriage in Islam, is number one, to have witnesses, at least 2 witnesses there. And one of the wisdoms of nikah, marriage, is to be announced. So if anyone sees you with that particular girl or that girl with particular guy, they know that these 2 are already married because that marriage has been announced. But no, they want to keep those things secret. And imagine later on if anything happens or any kid comes along, you know how many complications and issues there is. So what are some of the reasons why our children not getting married? Number one, what I have seen as an imam is I see that there is a lot of lack of responsibility in our children. They are very comfortable living with their parents and not paying any bills, not doing anything. Whether they work or they don't work, the parents are the ones that always provide. So they don't want to take that responsibility because some of them told me, and I'm sure you already know this, they say, my goodness, when I was not married, I was living with my parents. I went out whenever I want. I came back whenever I want. I didn't have to worry about any bills. Even if I didn't work, my parents provided for me because they have been here for so many years. So they want to live comfortably. Why? Because those people don't understand the meaning of marriage, how important marriage in Islam. Or Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? Marriage is my sunnah. Marriage is my path. And whoever disregards my sunnah, he is not amongst us. And who should take this responsibility and telling our children? Number one is the parents. And if their parents didn't get married, those kids wouldn't be in this dunya. So we have to make them aware that everything happens with time. When you're young is different, but now is the time for those children to take responsibilities of their own. So I see that lack of responsibility, and I see that they're comfortable living with the parents. And sometimes, wallahi, I see the Aussie families, non-Muslims. What they do is, as soon as their kids turn 18, what they say? Out. Or if they want to stay with their parents, they force them to pay rent. In a way, we don't do that as Muslims. But at the same time, it teaches them responsibility. That now you're old enough to think of yourself. And if you're not able to think for yourself, how are you going to think for your family in the future when you get married? And this is important for imams and for parents and for community as a whole to discuss these matters. Just ignoring them and just, trying to put our head in the sand, it's not going to make these issues go away. So it's important to discuss forums as Muslims, as communities, sit down together and how we can help our kids getting married and how do we find out that they're ready for marriage. Number 2, my dear brothers and sisters, a lot of parents say as well, and they say, or children say, as well, that what they say is, we are not ready for marriage. And now when they say this term, we are not ready for marriage, it's important for us to analyze it and discuss it further. What do you mean you're not married for marriage? Because for everyone is different. For some people say, I'm not ready for marriage because I don't have a house of my own, and I don't have a car, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. If you wait for all these things, they will never happen. True or not? What our Prophet ﷺ said, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj. All you young men, who is able to provide that mahr and to be able to provide for himself and his wife, they should get married, not delay the marriage. But no, some say that I took this path, the path of the career. I want to study first, and I want to finish my master's first and my PhD, and I want to find a job, and I have to pay back the debt, and I have to buy the house, and I have to do this. So what I consider success according to Islam, and this is my humble opinion, we see a lot of people who are successful in their businesses and they have failed in a personal level when it comes to family. And we see others, they might be good in family, but they don't want to work and they don't want to provide for the family, and that is a failure as well. And I remember I told you why Prophet ﷺ was chosen to be number 1 most influential person in the history of mankind. Do you know? And why Jesus ﷺ, Isa wasn't chosen, but Muhammad ﷺ? Because Jesus was never married. So he didn't show how is to be a father and how is to be a husband. And that's why Michael Hart, he said Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't just a great leader, a great commander, but he was a successful father and he was a successful husband. And that's how you balance out between these two. So career, it's important in life, but family is the most important thing, my dear brothers and sisters. And especially for the sisters, career, and I am educated myself, and Islam encourages us to educate ourselves. This is part of our faith. But it is important to balance it out. Not just focus on your career, and then what happens is comes to the next issue. And that is, once you reach to a certain age, the way that you live your lives, you're set in those rules, and people hesitate to get married. Have you seen those people who are 35, 40 years of age? They don't even bother to get married. They don't even think about it, because they're set in their ways of life that they don't want that to be changed. And a lot of them, when they get married, they say, oh my God, I lived my life for 40 years now. This person came along and everything has changed. So that's why marriage younger, it is very, very important. And not just between husband and wife, but how many parents I have seen, which I did admire. I was marrying their children. They had a wedding and all that. When I asked the father of that person, of that boy or that girl, how old was he? You know how old was he? 42. 42, and he's witnessing his child getting married. Or the mother being, you're young and your kids growing up, like you almost grow up together. That is a beautiful thing to do. But no, nowadays, unfortunately, we see a lot of parents that are 50, 60, and they have their children being 3 years old, 5 years old. You know how difficult that is, even emotionally? That's why when we study in psychology, parents who are a bit older, it's easier for them to get angrier. You know, it's harder for them to cope with children, you know, with their playing and with all that stuff. When you're younger, it's easier for you to accept that change. And that is very, very important. The other issue, my dear brothers and sisters, and that involves us parents, is the parents' interference. Maybe the son is ready to get married. Maybe the daughter is ready to get married, but parents are not ready. And they expect to find the bride for their son themselves. That era, that time is gone. Don't try to pick a wife for your son, because tomorrow, if anything goes wrong, he's going to blame you as a parent. You chose that for me. You should have looked better. You should have asked more people. In Islam, it's important for the two young ones to meet each other. Or Prophet ﷺ encouraged the Sahabas to meet that person that they're about to get married to. Of course, within the limits of Islam. And that is very, very important. They say, no, because my son is a golden boy. Maybe they've got only one son. And they say, there is no girl for my son. That is a very wrong approach. Your son and my son is just like any other sons out there. My son is golden boy for me. Your son is golden boy for you. Everyone's children is the same. So you have to understand who your son or your daughter is. Number two, you have to sit down and see. And it's important to have that open communication. You remember I told you, you have to treat your children sometimes as friends. I know that the older generation, you know, parent and child was a different relationship. I was raised that way. But I cannot raise my children the same way, because I was raised overseas. Wallahi al-azim. Even I was 20-something years of age, I was embarrassed to look my father in his eyes. I was raised like that. But do I expect that from my son? No. So I have to lower myself so my son and my daughter can trust me that whatever it happens to them, they can tell me and not be scared. Because if they don't tell us as parents, who do you think they're going to tell to? They're going to go tell their friends. And their friends maybe doing the same things. They encourage, this is having boyfriend, girlfriend, it's a normal thing. In universities, what happens in all this social media, TikTok and Netflix and all these apps that our kids watch, they see, what do they see on Netflix? What do they see on those TikTok? That relationship outside marriage, it's a good thing. Because they make it look that way. And what our kids say nowadays? No, I don't want to get married, but we want to live together. I don't want to take that commitment of marriage, but at the same time, we decided to live together. SubhanAllah. How is that possible? How? And even according to Australian law, remember, if two husband and wife or whatever you want to treat them, they are not registered even in Australian law. If any kids come along, that father is not acknowledged as that child's parent, that person. So you must have a legal marriage in place as well. And I always encourage our children to do nikah, and that is a must, but also to do the legal marriage as well, because the law protects you. No, we want to do only nikah. And tomorrow something happens and nothing, the husband nothing gives to the wife. And she cannot complain to the government because there's no legal papers in place. So don't let anyone fool your children to say, let's do just the nikah and don't worry about legal marriage. Because a lot of them, unfortunately, they are not sincere what they're saying. They are not sincere what they're saying. Let's do this even if we break up, it's just Islamic marriage, it's not a big deal. Even they that don't consider Islamic marriage to be a big deal. Even though that is more important in Islam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is witnessing that. But no, I have witnessed so many of them, separated after a while, even though we told the families that this is what the wife deserves and this, all that, they didn't bother. If you go to the court will not acknowledge Islamic marriage unless you do the civil marriage as well. You understand? Very, very important. Why? Because, wallahi al-azim, as parents, if we see our children struggling, if we see our children getting mistreated, it's not just our children will suffer, but we as parents will suffer with them. Especially when it comes to our daughters. Be extra careful who are you giving your daughter to. Very important. Especially we try to raise our daughters, and sometimes we are unfair with our daughters. We are unfair. Why? Because we always favor our sons. Even when it comes to our son is 18 years of age, let's buy him a car. But if our daughter turns 18, it's not a big deal. Wallah, it's not Islamic. Whatever gift you buy, you have to buy to all your kids equally. And this is proven in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. When one father gave some land to this boy, and the case went to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, do you have other children? He said, yes. Did you give the same gift to your other children? No. He said, take it back. That is not acceptable. If it's your son, you let him go out. Go out, do whatever you want. It's not a big deal. But we don't let our daughters. And how is that fair Islamically? We have to educate them the same way. Not give freedom to one and try to lock up the other one. That is not Islamic. Because after that we see a lot of cracks in the family as well. How do you favor this and you don't favor that? How do you do this for this one and you don't do that for the other one? It's not Islamic and it's not fair. While those children are under your roof, you have to treat them equally. Someone says, but am I allowed to love the other one more than the other? When it comes to emotions, when it comes to feelings, there is something that we cannot control. That's fair. But when it comes to treating them in front of them, we have to be just and we have to treat them equally. Doesn't matter it's a daughter or a son. You understand? This is very, very important, my dear brothers and sisters. So, social media is playing an important role. And as a result, as I mentioned last week, our kids have low self-esteem. They have no self-confidence. They don't believe in themselves. And sometimes they don't think that they're beautiful enough. They don't think that they deserve the best. Why? Because it's our fault as parents. Again, it's Islamic. It's a sunnah to give compliments to your daughter. If she's wearing a good dress, say you look beautiful. Because if you don't give it to her, she's going to look for those compliments from somewhere else. And we don't want that. We want them to have self-confidence, to believe in themselves. So, in a nutshell, my dear brothers and sisters, Islam, it's always in the middle. We don't want our kids to rush in their marriages. I'm not saying that. But we don't want also for them to delay their marriage until they are 40 or 50 or whatever. We have to sit down with them, and once we see that they're ready to get married, we want them to get married and not delay that marriage. Because sometimes if they rush into marriages, that can lead in divorce, and people can get hurt and all that stuff. And even delaying it, there are a lot of issues there as well. You're not able to cope. You're not patient as you used to be when you were younger and all those things. So it's very, very important for us, number one, is to sit down and discuss this topic with our children, to be very open with them, to say, son, even if you're 20, if you're ready to get married, don't be shy to tell us. Let us know and we will help you. Or if you're not ready to get married, why you're not ready? Why? Is it because of the house? Is it what are the reasons? Sit down and have that open conversation with them And inshallah, this will help them to make that decision. And that decision, will help them. Because sometimes, and I see very recently, and people tell me that, some people pass away. And sometimes we find out it's not just passing away a normal death. SubhanAllah, some of them even end their own lives because of the pressure of the husband or the pressure of the wife or the pressure from this or from that. Wallahi, how difficult that is, how sad that is for a member of our community to commit suicide. And that's when we know that there's a real issue here. But we don't address the issues. We try to ignore them, we try to hide them. As Muslim community, we try to keep issues in the family. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes in the family there is no one to give you a professional advice. Seek advice from someone else who is wise, who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and who is able to help you. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be embarrassed. Because there's no such thing as perfect marriage. Sometimes we all need advice. We all need help from other people. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our children from any harm, Ya Rabbal Alameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that we are able to educate our children according to Islam, Ya Rabbal Alameen. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that we have good relationship with our children, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those and to make our children so they can respect us as parents, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Oh Allah, for all our children who are not married, make it easy for them to find the righteous spouse, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Oh Allah, make us of those that you're pleased with us in this world and the next, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Make us of those that we are able to feed ourselves and our families with halal and to stay away from haram, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Ameen, ameen. وقولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه سيستغفر الله إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.